Palmer, we talked about it last week, and I think it's pretty safe to say in evaluating a spring game, the trenches are difficult, especially with the run game being somewhat compromised. Those matchups on the outside, they're almost like a real game. They're almost like full football because it's almost exactly like that type of matchup between the wide receivers and the defensive backs. Now, as you set up for us before the spring game, with the big weapons out for Georgia, with the secondary being probably the most questionable unit on the team based on defections to the NFL and based on injuries, that they might be in for a tough ride if they had to face the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 guys. But those guys were out of the lineup.
Yeah, I mentioned it earlier. Georgia was down 6 scholarship receivers. George Pickens with an ACL injury, he'll probably miss the season. But in the other 5 guys are likely to be back for the fall. They had Dominic Blaylock that is continuing to recover from an ACL injury. He actually was dressed out and went through the 7-on-7 drills that they were doing earlier, before this actual scrimmage. So probably if it was an actual game, he probably would have been good to go. But, they're going to play it safe with him. They had Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, who's coming back from an ankle injury that ended his 2020 season. He was in a no-contact jersey but went through those 7-on-7 drills. Jermaine Burton, had a slight knee injury this spring. Again, no-contact jersey, went through the 7-on-7 drills. Arian Smith actually was in a no-contact jersey but played in the game, but obviously didn't get the full experience. And he was actually running with the number 2 offense, just because of, the limitations with him and his injuries. They were missing Justin Robinson, Jackson Meeks. Definitely a banged up receiver room. But in terms of what they did have, Adonai Mitchell was very impressive. He's an early enrollee out of Missouri City, Texas. Actually didn't play his senior year of high school football. And as he was getting ready to come to Georgia, early enrolled, was actually here for bowl practices as Georgia was preparing for the Peach Bowl. But Kirby Smart told us after the game that he got sick and so was on campus but didn't get to practice. Was here for probably a little over a week but didn't actually get to practice. So that was unfortunate for him. But he absolutely made the most of his opportunities this spring. Stepped up in a big-time role, led the team in targets with 13 targets, brought in 7 of those for 105 yards. Both of those were team highs in the game, and had a nice touchdown connection with JT Daniels to end the first half. Those 2 were certainly on the same page, and I think that's really encouraging for Georgia fans because, Daniels clearly was very comfortable with George Pickens. You saw that in those last 4 games of the season. Pickens had his 2 biggest games of the season against Missouri and Cincinnati, and Daniels, was right there with him. Those 2 were on the same page all, down that final stretch. Without Pickens, there's a lot of questions about who's going to be replacing that, who's going to be the guy that JT Daniels is most comfortable with, and Adonai Mitchell looked, incredibly comfortable with him. He was running a lot of the same routes that Pickens was running, playing that X position. He was in, some one-on-one matchups. JT said that Adonai is a really twitchy guy, that they feel great about him. When you can get him in a one-on-one matchup, similar to George Pickens, you feel confident, and the ball is going to go that way a lot of the time. You saw Mitchell getting thrown the back shoulder ball that Georgia loves to throw. And he, again, like a lot of these players, he got more and more comfortable as the game went along and made some plays the more that he and JT Daniels got connected. Kirby Smart said after the game that Mitchell's a guy, he was a 3-star recruit out of high school, not the most highly regarded guy in terms of recruiting rankings. I believe he was the number 64 wide receiver per the 247 Sports composite, was in the 300s in terms of overall players, 3-star recruit. And this is a guy that Kirby said, look, we trust our evaluations. We think that we evaluate players as good, if not better, than anyone in the country. And this was a guy that, regardless of what everyone else said, we wanted him. He was a take for us. And so, they pushed hard for him. He was committed to Ole Miss and ended up silently decommitting from the Rebels, Lane Kiffin and the Rebels, in May before he committed to Georgia in July. Like I said, didn't play his senior season of football, and came in, really made the most of his opportunities, and had really strong spring practice. Smart said that the last three practices for Mitchell were the three best for him, and as Georgia had these receivers get banged up, more and more opportunities opened up, and he certainly took advantage of those.